Years of turmoil in Bangladesh putting a fragile economy under stress. Even further stress, whoever wins the vote today inherits a country that needs to find new engines of growth amid shrinking fiscal space. The early rise of Bangladesh was powered by three engines: the ready-made garment industry, remittances from millions of overseas workers, and remarkable agricultural resilience. From extreme poverty to lower middle income status. The economy went from contraction in the years after its independence in 1971 to consistent growth from the 1980s. Growth was so strong that around 2006, Bangladesh began to pull ahead of Pakistan. The country is now a global powerhouse in apparel exports. It has made impressive strides in other sectors. Manufacturing has expanded into pharmaceuticals, ceramics, shipbuilding, and even IT services. A fast forward to the period before and after the ouster of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Despite political turmoil, Bangladesh still saw foreign direct investments jump 20% from 2024 to 2025. Well, that suggests continued confidence in long-term prospects for global firms. The interim government under Muhammad Yunus appears to have kept that momentum going. The country still faces some stubborn issues, although inflation has eased to 8.5%. After an early rise to double digits, it's still the highest in South Asia. Food inflation is particularly high, and that hurts households, especially in combination with stagnant wage growth and high unemployment. Concerns are mounting over Bangladesh's banks. Bad loans are rising. Regulators were allegedly pressured to hide the damage, masking defaults and repeatedly rolling over bad debt. Politically connected borrowers piling in with money allegedly siphoned offshore with little intent to repay. The increase in non-performing loans reflecting real conditions in the banking sector. Much of the heavy lifting will now be left to the next government in Dhaka. On Bangladesh's historic election, we're joined by Professor Naomi Hossain from SOAS University of London. Professor Hossain, this next government, with that heavy lifting ahead on the economy, which party do you see has unveiled a platform best guaranteed to address these challenges?
I mean, well, thank you very much for covering this story and for your economic analysis. It is a very tricky situation for the next government, whoever comes into power. And in fact, neither of the main front-runner parties have really shown very clearly how they're going to get themselves out of the economic situation in which we find ourselves. The manifestos really have been a shopping list of nice things to have, but without any kind of costing or sense of how they will be paid for. Our tax GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world. We have a real problem with raising revenue domestically. Public services are desperately underfunded. I've been looking into the education crisis in Bangladesh recently, and we spend 1.5% of our GDP in Bangladesh on education, as opposed to the global recommended 6%. And there's no sign that any of the parties have any strategies for dealing with these situations yet. That said, the BNP has a track record, of course, of government that the other frontrunner does not have, and was in power and presiding over relatively robust growth in the 90s and the 2000s. So I think to many voters, probably the BNP looks like the safest pair of hands, but we will know in a matter of hours.
The BNP was in power 2001, 2006, 1996 to 2001 to 2006, and again after that. What was its record in governance in those two periods when it was in government?
Its record on the economy and on development was reasonable. There were some quite innovative policies were adopted, but on the whole, the BNP and the Awami League had very similar approaches to the economy, which was liberalization, emphasizing export oriented manufacturing as a kind of labor-intensive strategy for growth, and some investments in human development, human capital. We expect them to do the same again, but the BNP also had a track record, particularly in its last stint in power, 2001 to 2006, of repressing opponents, of installing forces to suppress groups that they saw as opponents or as criminals. The Rapid Action Battalion, a paramilitary group, was set up under their watch. And they are credibly charged with lots and lots of corruption, just as the Awami League was. To a lesser degree, it must be said. They were only in power 5 years, in 2001 to 2006. But nonetheless, they will have to show, I think, an electorate that they have cleaned up their act in a big way.
Given how endemic corruption is, both Jamaat-e-Islami as well as BNP have made it their campaign promise to root out corruption. Jamaat-e-Islami has made that, in fact, almost as clarion call to the electorate. Do you see it having a program to have more success in this than any other party?
I think it's been really important for the Jamaat-e-Islami to argue a case that they are the clean candidates in this election. And I think the main basis for saying so is that they have not had a lot of history in power. And so they don't have a track record of credible charges of corruption against them in particular. But also on the grounds that they are men of religion, that they are pure, and that religion will restrain them, will constrain the tendencies to corruption. I think that the entire system has quite strong elements of corruption throughout the bureaucracy, throughout the business sector. Every part of Bangladeshi society is to some extent shaped by corruption. So I don't think religious purity is going to be enough to prevent corruption going forward. No.
Well, religious purity doesn't serve. Constitutional change might, in fact, be the one factor that does ameliorate corruption. And we have another vote today, 84 issues, 4 questions, just yes or no on whether or not Bangladesh should pursue the July Charter. What are your hopes that this will clear, and if it should clear, that it can, in fact, be implemented?
It's not clear, in all honesty, how meaningful the referendum vote can be. It is, as you pointed out, a lot of issues, very big and very complex issues have been put on the referendum, and people are allowed to vote yes or no on incredibly complex issues. And these complex issues are also presented in incredibly difficult language that the vast majority of the Bangladeshi electorate is unlikely to be able to fully understand. So when people are being encouraged, including by the interim government, to vote yes for change, which is how it's being framed to people, it's not clear. I think that on the whole, the reform agenda is proposing to shore up democracy, to prevent a return to the backsliding that we saw under the Awami League government. And it's quite possible that some of those reforms, if implemented, will do that. There are lots of questions about the legal status of the referendum results, whether it passes or not. There's lots of questions about the practicality of bringing those forward, getting constitutional amendments or new laws passed, and lots of questions, of course, about which of the parties have a great commitment to getting these things through at all.
Well, thanks. These
reforms will restrain their power.
Yes, in fact, we saw a great deal of horse trading going into even reaching agreement on the July Charter, dictated very much by vested interests. Thanks for joining us, Professor Naomi Hossain from SOAS University of London.